581. Thank you everyone for coming. Please have a seat while we wait for everyone to arrive. The Congress will begin soon. A grand hall appeared deeper within the building. Rows upon rows of chairs lined the space, and I picked a random seat before settling in. Leon joined me shortly after. We sat further back from where the more important people were, making it a little harder to hear and see. But that wasn't really a problem. It'd be embarrassing if we couldn't hear what was happening as superhumans. It was just a little troublesome. With that being said, if we wanted to, we probably could have sat at the front. Aoife would have gladly provided us with seats. Same for Delilah, who gave me a glance, subtly patting the seat next to her. I merely ignored her and took a seat in our designated spot. Considering our status, we'd be too out of place if we sat at the front. Not only that, Delilah's father was present, so, oh, right, there's something I'm curious about. Recalling something, I turned to face Leon. Quote. For how long has our family been followers of Mortem? As those words left my mouth, my gaze instinctively drifted toward the delegates of the Church of Mortem. Like the other churches, they too were dressed in white garments. They sat at the very front alongside the other churches, their robes adorned with a green insignia depicting a snake coiled around a bleeding hand. For as long as I remember. Leon responded, his tone growing somewhat faint. I narrowed my eyes. For some time now, whenever Mortem was mentioned, Leon always seemed uneasy. Was he hiding something? The reason why I'm a follower of Mortem is also because of the house. Considering that they took me in, I followed what they told me to follow. Just like I'm your knight because of it. Oh, then what about Julian? Julian. Leon licked his lips, leaning his head back. I'm not really sure. He always threw a tantrum whenever it was time for our religious duties. Most of the time, it was just me and Evelyn who attended the classes. Oh, yeah, this sounded just about right. This indeed sounded like something Julian would do. Now that I think about it, I know nothing about Julian. His past, how he turned out to be that way, and his relationship with Aldrich and the others. I had thought about it before, but Julian's past seemed filled with a lot of unknowns. My focus had been so consumed by the effort to seal him away that I hesitated to use the second leaf and uncover more about his past. In a way, I had been afraid of what would happen if I got too close. I didn't want to lose control of this body again. But, what about now that he's sealed? Perhaps now, I could do so. I no longer had to worry about him seizing control of the body again. In that sense, using the second leaf on him shouldn't be an issue. I'd also learn more about the past, and what turned Julian that way. Right, Leon, you also mentioned that Julian wasn't always like this. When did you first notice a change in him? When? Leon raised his head slightly, his eyes growing hazy. Quote. Rather than instantaneous, it happened gradually. Gradually. His obsession didn't surface right away. It started gradually. At first, we didn't think much of it, but as time passed, he grew more aggressive and unhinged. I think if the change had been instant, then people would have started questioning if he had been possessed sooner. Yeah, that makes sense. But now that I think about it, Leon's eyes narrowed as he massaged the bottom part of his jaw. It was around the time he began practicing curse magic with the family head that he started to change. I think that was when I first started noticing the changes in him. No, more than that, that was when he started to develop an addiction to the sword. I stopped for a moment before hastily looking at Leon. Did you, Jay? Yeah, I know. Leon pursed his lips, but I don't think the family head had anything to do with it. Well, I'm not sure. He coached both Julian and me, teaching us the sword. But unlike me, Julian wasn't talented at all. I feel like that might be the real reason he changed. Oh, I see. Putting it that way, it made sense. However, there was something else that I recalled. I remember you said learned a unique sword technique. The incomplete one that you asked me to help you with. What about it? Where did you learn that? That one. I didn't learn it from anyone. I found it. I see. Thinking back to his sword technique, I had indeed helped him refine it some time ago. Yet, I hadn't seen him use it since then. That was odd, especially considering how powerful it was supposed to be. But then again, I hadn't seen Leon fight at his fullest in a long time. Nonetheless, I was quite curious about that sword technique. Given how I had been able to develop the footwork for it, what would happen if I practiced it? I hadn't given it much thought before, too preoccupied with other matters. But if I were to ask Leon to teach me the sword, would I actually be able to learn it? Leon had previously said that Julian wasn't very talented with swords, but what about me? I wasn't exactly Julian, would I? It appears as though everyone is present. A soft yet authoritative voice jolted me out of my thoughts. Almost instantly, my head snapped toward the front, where an old man with a long white beard and glasses stood. Immediately, whatever noise had filled the hall vanished into silence. All eyes soon focused on the elderly figure. Noticing how quiet everyone became, I suddenly grew curious. Who exactly was this old man? Haha, it seems my reputation still carries enough weight to capture everyone's attention. That being said, I can see some of you look a bit confused about who I am. In that case, allow me to give a brief introduction. The old man removed his glasses, displaying his clear yellow eyes. I'm the current emperor of the Nurs Ansifa Empire, Joseph L. Megrail. Quote. My mouth dropped upon hearing his introduction. At the same time, I felt a little embarrassed. The fact that I couldn't even recognize the current emperor of the empire was a pretty big deal. Not only that, but his eyes were the biggest giveaway. It was just that, I didn't expect the current emperor, Aoife's father, to be this old. While people in this world lived longer than in my old one, judging by his appearance, I was certain he was well over 100 years old. No, it makes sense. Thinking about it, Atlas was also extremely old. It was just that, he managed to make himself look younger, unlike the current emperor. As my thoughts wandered to the current emperor, a sudden realization struck me. Hastily, I lowered my head, my gaze locking onto the shoes he was wearing. Although it wasn't exactly easy considering that they were hidden behind his black robe, I still managed to catch a glimpse of them. Ah, it felt as if the air had been knocked from my lungs, and for a moment, I nearly rose to my feet. But I soon settled down and leaned back on my chair. I really hope that I'm wrong. If it was as I imagined, then the emperor was going to be murdered. I lowered my head and covered it with both of my hands. I really hope that I was wrong. The Congress was a 5-day event, with each day dedicated to discussing different problems and pressing issues. The first 4 days were designated for the emperors of each nation, with each ruler taking a day to speak, while the final day was reserved for the members of the 7 churches. Today's was the Nurs Ansifa's turn. I had initially expected the emperor's speech to be a long-winded monologue filled with meaningless formalities, but to my surprise, it was clear and easy to understand. To summarize his key points, the mirror dimension was becoming increasingly unstable. He emphasized the need for cooperation to prevent its expansion and maintain balance, among other concerns. And that was basically it. He spoke for no more than 30 minutes before finally ending it. Clap, clap, clap. As the hall thundered with applause and the emperor waved his hand, I also joined in. This continued for the next several minutes until it all came to an end and the silence returned. Still standing in the middle, the emperor smiled and spoke. Now that I've finished, I'll be taking questions for the next 30 minutes. If any of you have something to ask, please feel free to do so. Immediately, over half of the people present raised their hands. I stared at the scene speechlessly before turning my head to look at Leon. But it was right as I turned my head that I noticed something strange with Leon. Are you okay? His entire face had gone pale, and sweat trickled down the side of his face. Staring at him, I grew alarmed. My alarm deepened when I saw him raise his arm. That was when I noticed his hair, every strand standing on end. Before I could get any words out, Leon's lips parted. Something is about to happen. Something really bad. He clenched his shirt. My entire body is screaming in alarm. We need to get out of this place. We need to warn everyone that something is about to happen. I don't know how much time we have. Leon tried to stand up, but just as he did, I placed my hand over his sleeve and pulled him back down. What? Ignoring Leon, I took out my pocket watch. Tick, tick, it was 8:34 p.m. Leaning back on my chair, I took a deep breath and opened my status window. That was when I activated my skill, Eyes of the Seer. At the same time, my eyes drifted towards a certain individual sitting in the front. I wonder if he'll interfere once again. I hoped he did. That way, I'd be able to take it all from him. 582. Tick, tick, 8:36 p.m. 2 minutes had elapsed since Leon's words. So far, everything was still flowing naturally. There was nothing strange with the situation. Julian, we should leave now. If something, don't worry, I've got it. But, relax. The only unusual thing was Leon, who wasn't acting like himself. He seemed a bit panicked, though there was no real reason for concern. In this current situation, I can turn back time regardless of what happens. Well, that is as long as something happens within an hour. That was the time limit of the skill. Whether it was the two of us who died, someone else, or even if the entire place crumbled, I would be able to handle it. But that also begged the question. Single quote. Considering just how many powerful people are present, how can something happen? Surely Delilah, or the several people who gave off the aura of a monarch would be able to react in time, right? That was unless something completely out of everyone's expectations occurred. But what could that be? I guess I'll just wait and see. Tick, tick, 8:41 p.m. 5 more minutes had passed. So far, nothing had yet to occur. This made me frown, but I wasn't too worried. Taking a look at Leon who sat next to me, and seeing his face growing paler, I felt more reassured. His instincts were usually right. I just have to wait a little more. I still had give or take 50 minutes. That was plenty of time. Tick, tick, 9:02 p.m. Or so I thought, but as 20 more minutes passed, nothing had still occurred. This made me frown. I still wasn't panicking since there was still time, but things were starting to go in a direction that made me feel uncomfortable. Do you have any idea why the mirror dimension is growing so unstable lately? Is there some sort of answer to the strange phenomenon? Overhearing a certain question coming from the audience, I raised my head to see one of the reporters holding onto a small notepad. Since he was seated, I couldn't gauge his height, but he appeared quite lanky. His brown hair was styled in a bowl cut, and a pair of square-shaped glasses rested on his long nose. Jotting something down on his notepad, he continued. This phenomenon has not only occurred in the Nur-Zanzifa Empire but in all other empires. The situation within the Kasha is also extremely dire. The reporter paused for a brief moment before continuing. However, his disdain for those of the Kasha was quite clear. Those people do not have the necessary order to fend off the monsters coming from the mirror dimension, leaving the other empires bearing the brunt of their incompetence. How does the Nur-Zanzifa Empire plan on handling the situation? Will you be helping the other empires? His question brought a wave of whispers and murmurs throughout the hall. Even I was surprised by his questions. Does this guy not care about his life? To ask such questions in front of the emperor of the strongest empire. He really had a lot of balls. Taking a look around, I could see several vassals belonging to the Nur-Zanzifa Empire showing signs of anger, and some knights even went as far as touching their weapons. But thankfully, the emperor didn't seem to mind the question as he raised his hand to calm everyone down. With a smile, he soon answered. While you're only allowed one question at a time, seeing the looks that some are giving me, I'll just answer all of your questions. He looked quite friendly while speaking. His voice was also pleasing to the ear. So much so that for a moment, I forgot all about the time and just focused on his words. The reason for the sudden change in the mirror dimension is not known yet. We've tried to find more clues regarding the situation, but unfortunately, we weren't able to figure much. Even after so much time has happened. Unfortunately, the emperor turned to look at the delegates from the other empires. For several reasons, the other emperors weren't present. Or it was more like, they were watching the entire thing from another more hidden area. It can't be helped. I've tried coordinating with the other empires, but they too also seem helpless regarding the situation. It's not something that we can figure out considering just how vast the mirror dimension is. I see. Then what about the Kasha? What are your plans? Will you help the other empires? The emperor smiled before shaking his head. No. His words were met with a brief moment of silence before suddenly, the hall erupted into an uproar. What? You're not willing to help? Aren't you supposed to be the strongest of the 4 empires? Why aren't you helping? This is a crisis that involves everyone. Isn't this Congress supposed to be held to improve the relationship between the 4 empires? Are you trying to achieve the opposite? Indeed, nobody appeared to be pleased by the situation. I could feel the animosity in the room and my body started to tense. Tick, tick, 9:05 p.m. Could this be it? Could Leon's bad feelings stem from here? The uproar in the room continued to persist for the next several minutes until the emperor finally raised his hand, and one by one, everyone started to calm down. Regaining everyone's attention again, the emperor turned his attention towards the reporter. Please don't misunderstand. It's not like we're not trying to help. It's that we've already helped. What? The hall erupted into a wave of murmurs and whispers. I could even hear some of them coming from those beside me as they said, they helped. How come I've never heard of that? Is he lying? I was also confused, but soon, a thought crossed my mind and my brow twitched. This bastard. May I have everyone's attention? Clapping his hand gently, the Emperor brought everyone's attention back to him as he retrieved a small spherical object from out of thin air. Tapping onto it, an image of a clear sky appeared. What do you guys think of this image? It was a simple question. One that made a lot of people's brows furrow. Isn't that just the regular sky? Quote. What about the sky? The more confused the people appeared to be, the more the Emperor's smile seemed to relax. Looking at him, I felt my mouth twitch again. This sky. What if I were to tell you all that this sky isn't within any of the Empire's land? What? How does that? This right here is the sky belonging to the Eastern Kasha. Flick. The image shifted, revealing a vast city in the distance, one surrounded by towering walls, with a massive golden building standing prominently. The hall fell into a stunned silence as everyone looked at the image in disbelief. Before chaos could erupt, the Emperor spoke. What you see here is real. Those from the Verdant Empire can confirm this. The Emperor eyed those from the Verdant Empire before continuing. Not only that, but the ones responsible for this was none other than my empire. You say that we should contribute, but the reality of the matter is that we have already contributed. Right now, the burden that the Verdant Empire sustains is a lot less than before. Furthermore, with the improved relations with the Kasha, we've also managed to trade more with them. Staring directly at the reporter, the Emperor's tone grew softer. Quote. We've already contributed more than enough. We have achieved more than any other empire has. And it cost us dearly. Fuck yeah, it did. My mental health, and a lot of pain. The list could go on, but before any of that, I felt like throwing a chair towards the Emperor. He was very clearly taking credit for all my hard work. He was also shameless enough to make it seem like they sent thousands upon thousands of troops in order to achieve this. It was all me. At least pay me. If you managed to achieve such a feat, then why not do it for the other empires? It could help Ma, at the cost of our empire's forces. Cutting the reporter off, the Emperor's eyes narrowed a little. You seem to be talking a lot about altruism, but you must understand that I'm the Emperor of a large empire. The most powerful, if I may add. What do you think will happen if I use all my forces to help out the others? Can you guarantee that the other empires will leave us alone? The reporter started to stutter. Indeed, the Emperor was making a great point. If he did use a lot of resources to help the other empires, it would lead to their forces weakening. If that happened, then would the Nurs Ansifa still be considered the strongest empire? To some extent, helping them out was essentially going to weaken the empire while making life easier for the other empires. The Emperor would be a fool to help. Of course, the real issue was that he didn't have a zenith to rip the sky for him. Even if the Emperor wanted to, there was no way he could do what the old man did. He's as shameless as they come. Unknowingly, my gaze fell on Aoife, who sat at the front with a stoic expression. No, wait, looking closely, I could see her face was entirely red. Single quote. So she's at least aware of how shameless her father is. As if sensing my gaze, her head slowly turned and our eyes met. Immediately, her face started to wince as she bit onto her lips. I just sliced my thumb across my neck. Didn't really care if others saw me threaten the princess. Either way, time was going to reset anyway. It was then that it happened. Tick, tick, 9:11 p.m. Before I could even understand what was happening, several people stood up in succession. Swoosh, swoosh, I recognized several. A few were some of the powerful people I presumed to be monarchs, or at least close to that level. But most importantly, all such figures were delegates from the other empires. Their actions were sudden and unexpected, catching many off guard. At that moment, I intently focused on every little detail around me, imprinting everything in my mind. I knew that whatever was about to happen next was of extreme importance. And it was then that I noticed it. The eyes of those that stood up. They're hollow. Spirit. Someone quick. Attack. The expressions of many changed, with several springing into action, but by then, it was too late as several spells shot in the direction of the Emperor. They were so fast that even though Delilah managed to react extremely fast, she was only able to stop several. Your Majesty, your, bang, a terrifying explosion thundered throughout the palace, shaking the very pillars that were holding the structure in place. Ah, help, screams echoed, while the palace rumbled. Rumble, rumble. By the time the dust settled, everyone's attention fell towards the direction of the Emperor. What is going on? An unexpected scene greeted the eyes of all those present. Standing before the emperor was a green-eyed figure, his dark garb swaying gently as several figures in white stood behind him, holding onto a massive shield that guarded both him and the emperor. He stood before everyone, his lips gently pulled as his eyes eventually settled in my direction. Ah, that was when it became clear to me. Indeed, the reason why my vision was static was none other than because of him. He stole my vision, and prepared for this very moment. The moment when he would swoop in and save the emperor. Haha, I found myself laughing, quietly sitting back down in my seat as chaos erupted around me. And then, tick, tick, 8:34 p.m. Time reset, 583. With the flow of time turning back, the chaos that had once erupted in the hall faded. In its place was the emperor's soft voice. With the worsening of the mirror dimension, we've found that more and more monsters are starting to threaten the supply stations, forcing a lot of our manpower to focus there. Not only that, but the monsters also appear to be stronger. I'm afraid that we're about to reach a critical point of no return. I could still distinctly remember each word that came out of the emperor's mouth, and as I slowly turned my head, my eyes focused on a certain figure sitting at the front. He seemed focused on the emperor, his gaze sometimes flicking towards his nearby guards. Single quote. Just how far can you steal from me? He had stolen my vision and acted accordingly, turning the situation into one where he saved the emperor's life. In that sense, I could predict what he'd do next. He'd probably try to request something that might involve me. Is this your plan? I leaned back on my chair and covered my mouth. It was quite the plan, and if not for Leon's warning, it could have even succeeded. But there was one thing that he had overlooked. And it wasn't the fact that I could see into the future. I was certain he also couldn't, given that he didn't react strangely. Of course, it could have been an act, but I didn't think so. Most importantly, the one thing that Jackal overlooked was the fact that his actions might not get him in the good graces of the Emperor. At least, if the Emperor was related to the inverted sky. If he was, then I could more or less guess what the intentions behind the incident were. The complete breakdown of the relationship between the four empires. Or perhaps a reason for the Nurs Ansifa Empire to conquer and attack the other empires, taking them all for itself. I felt this was something Sithras would do. Of all the empires, his reach within the Nurs Ansifa Empire was extremely deep-rooted. I would even go as far as to argue that the royal family was a puppet, designed to follow his orders. But this was merely a hypothesis from my side. However, taking into consideration how everyone that had attacked seemed to belong to the three other empires, I had reason to believe that my thoughts weren't far off from the truth. It's a pity that Atlas didn't fill me in on anything. I was probably still not strong enough for him to involve me in such matters. How much easier would things be if he did? Julian. Overhearing Leon's words, I shook my head. Don't worry, we still have time before anything happens. What? How do you? Just observe your surroundings and look for anyone that might look suspicious to you. What are you talking about? At least shish. I placed my finger over my lips. Give me some time to think. The key to solving this situation was rather simple. It was to find the spirit user that was capable of controlling the powerful people from the other empires. Of course, knowing how they were capable of controlling such powerful people, I understood that even if I did find them, beating them would be an almost impossible task unless I somehow managed to get close enough to them to touch them. But I didn't really need to do that. Delilah was here, and so were a lot of other powerful people. All I needed to do was find the spirit user. But how exactly can I do that? I thought about the obvious, which was to ask for Delilah to help, but considering how her every movement was very likely monitored by everyone in the room, I understood it wouldn't be a good idea. Atlas was also out of the question considering how he most likely had a part in the matter. In that case, yeah, we're on our own. I sighed. What a surprise. What do you mean we're on our own? As Leon whispered next to me, I gave him a short reply. Just like you think, something is most likely going to go wrong. I thought about telling this to the Chancellor or asking for help, but that would be pointless. Nobody is going to believe us, and asking the Chancellor for help would make the ones involved to be more careful. It could buy time, though, so I took that into consideration. If I hadn't figured anything out by the time the deadline hit, I planned to involve her in some way. First things first, how much do you know about spirit magic? Quote. As much as you. Wait, why are you suddenly ask? As Leon paused, it finally hit him as his head flicked towards the front. Are you suggesting that someone is going to? Yes, exactly that. I was glad Leon was sharp enough to understand what I was trying to imply. His expression stiffened as he looked at me, his eyes narrowing. How do you even know this? No, never mind. Leon shook his head. Now is not the time for this. I'm glad you understand. Leon's mouth twitched, but he soon let it go. Regarding your question, I know just as much as you about spirit users. If you're suggesting that someone is planning on causing trouble using spirit magic, the two main ways would be through touch or voice. In some ways, it's pretty much the same as emotive magic. However, as far as I know, I don't think they're capable of doing delayed attacks. Delayed attacks? You mean tags? Yes. My eyes fell on the ones involved in the situation. There were a total of 7 of them, and they all sat with their backs straight, expressions normal while listening to the Emperor. If you put it that way, then things can be narrowed down quite a bit. I focused on the 7 figures behind the situation and observed everyone sitting around them. There were quite a few, and seeing as not all of them were sitting together, a thought occurred to me. Could there possibly be more than one spirit user responsible for this? Otherwise, how is it possible to affect them through touch if they couldn't do tags? Unless it was not just one spirit user, but multiple, or had some sort of way to delay the attack, I didn't think touch could be an effective means. Then, it can only be through voice. That was when it finally hit me and my gaze fell on the reporter who had been having an exchange with the Emperor. Back then, the only ones that had been speaking were none other than him and the Emperor. In that case, it's either one of the two. I couldn't discard the possibility that the Emperor had been the one responsible for getting people to attack him. Having been screwed over many times before, I knew not to discard any possibility. This is really troublesome. Did you figure something out? I did, but what? I pursed my lips before eventually answering. There's a chance the culprit might be the Emperor himself, and the means is most likely through voice. As expected, Leon's face almost collapsed the moment I said those words. If not for the fact that he knew how to keep composed, I was afraid he might have given himself away. I could hear him taking a deep breath as his eyes eventually shut. You understand just how ridiculous your claim is, right? I know, but you still think there's a chance it's him? Yes. Is there anyone else I should be aware of? Yes, the reporter with the bowl cut seated in the 3rd row. That one, Yes. Okay. Leon opened his eyes, his expression calming down considerably. It was enough to leave me somewhat surprised. As if he could read my thoughts, he answered flatly, I expected something this ridiculous to happen the moment we left the academy. That's why I'm not even surprised. Makes sense. As sad as it was, Leon had a point. I was indeed quite unlucky. Be it the academy or outside of the academy, something tended to happen to me. There was no use denying the fact that I was a jinx. Well, it's mostly because of the quests, but it's not like trouble still doesn't follow me even when they don't appear. One more question, do you know who will get affected by the spirit magic? Yes, and I even know the time. Leon's eyes narrowed further, but I feigned ignorance. Leon eventually shook his head in resignation. He spoke after a little bit of thought. Since you know who will get affected, the time in which they'll get affected, and who might be responsible for it, can't we just have the Chancellor prevent any noise from reaching the victims in question? It's possible. I nodded. This was one of the solutions I had previously thought about. But there were problems with this solution. First, nothing is stopping the spirit user from switching targets. Second, Delilah's actions could easily be mistaken for an attack. You're right. Leon nodded after a brief thought before speaking again. But she's one of the strongest people here. I don't think she is scared of anyone in the room even if they get angry. That's true. Nonetheless, her actions could also be taken as a sign of aggression, giving another reason for the relationship between the 4 empires to break down. This situation is a lot more complicated than I thought. The possibility that there was some variable I hadn't accounted for and that my current conclusions might be wrong, loomed over me like a scythe, ready to decapitate me at any moment. The worst part of the situation was that I felt completely chained. With so many powerful people present, I couldn't act like I usually did. Any small movement I made could be noticed at any moment. I was stuck in my seat, bound in a way that kept me from moving. It felt suffocating. Time, 9:05 p.m. At the same time, are all preparations ready? Jackal's gaze fell on the Templars stationed next to him. Following his orders, they had been ready to act at any second. Following the vision he had experienced, he understood just what sort of opportunity was about to fall on his lap. He planned on using this chance to save the Emperor and have him own a debt to him. If that happened, then getting his hands on the fake fragment was going to be even easier than expected. Having spent the past half a year preparing his body, he was now ready to take what originally belonged to him back and fully inherit Oricleus's powers. To become Oricleus himself. I can't waste this chance. There was still some time left before the scenario happened, and as he thought about the situation, his gaze drifted back, towards the fake fragment. It was there that Jackal caught him staring at the front, his face seemingly oblivious to the situation. A thin smile spread across his lips at the sight. As expected, the difference between us is big. The reason Jackal was able to steal Julian's vision was simply because the purity of Oricleus's blood in his body was purer. This was the difference between the two of them. Thinking about this, Jackal turned his head away and shifted his attention back towards the Emperor. Everything was proceeding smoothly. It was soon time for him to act. By then, everything would belong to him, and he would take what rightfully belonged to him. As his thoughts wandered toward the future, Julian's head slowly turned in the direction of Jackal's turned head. Soon, a smile formed on his lips as his lips parted. Why didn't I think about it before? 584. Leon felt the hair at the back of his neck rise. As each second ticked by, his breathing became more labored, and his legs and hands began to twitch. A deep sense of anxiety started to dawn in his gut. It felt suffocating, paralyzing, and yet, he said that everything will be all right, but is he really taking me seriously? Leon shifted his attention toward Julian as he sat next to him, his expression calm while he looked ahead and listened to the conversation that the Emperor was having with one of the reporters. Everything on the surface appeared calm. Everyone was focused on the conversation, with seemingly no worries. No, in fact, a few people appeared restless. In particular, when seeing the Emperor display several images of a blue sky. Leon noticed that several people grew more interested in the situation, with a wave of murmurs sweeping the hall. Could this be true? Did he say that he was capable of turning the sky like that in the Eastern Kasha? But how is that possible? Leon knew all about what the Emperor was talking about. After all, he had been there to witness it all. And yet, Leon only felt his back sweat more and more with each passing second. The only reason he was able to remain seated was because Julian seemed to be aware of what was going on. He was aware and also calm. But how could he remain so calm? Considering everything that Julian had shared, the situation was serious. Leon took a deep breath and closed his eyes. The restless feeling was starting to become extremely discomforting. As he grew stronger, so did his intuition, skill. In fact, he could use the skill at will now. Of course, there were still occasions where his skill didn't work or detect anything suspicious, but that was mainly because his strength was still lacking. The stronger he became, the less likely such variables would appear. He hadn't reached the point where the skill would activate automatically, but in moments of true danger, it would trigger on its own. And right now, Leon felt it scream more than any time in the past. Just how long do I have to wait for? Opening his eyes, Leon turned his attention towards the nearby clock and checked the time. It was 9:10 p.m. Bah, thump, Leon felt the beat of his own heart drum loudly within his mind as his breathing grew even more labored. It's coming soon, really soon. The reaction was even more intense than before, and when he turned his head, he saw that Julian's back had straightened and he was looking in a certain direction with unnatural sharpness and attention. Following Julian's line of sight, Leon saw him looking in the direction of those from the Oricleus church. Why was he? And then it happened. Right when the clock struck at 9:11 p.m., a change occurred to the hall. Swoosh, swoosh. As if automatically programmed to act at that specific moment, Leon saw the Templars from the Church of Oricleus suddenly dash in the direction of the Emperor. Their movements were fast, appearing before the Emperor in a split second. Exclamation mark question mark quote. Swoosh. Almost at the same time they moved, Julian stood up from his seat, pointing in the direction of the Emperor. The Emperor is under attack. His voice echoed through the hall, and as it filled the minds of everyone present, all attention shifted to the men standing before the Emperor as they focused their attention on the audience, seemingly waiting for something. But there was only one problem. Whatever they were expecting, it never occurred. As a result, they appeared in front of the Emperor with their weapons drawn. All the Templars could see were thousands of eyes fixed on them from the direction of those in attendance. And then, boom, The hall erupted in chaos. The emperor is under attack. Quickly, somebody stop them. The guards positioned throughout the area sprang into action, their movements swift and precise as they charged and surrounded the Templars who had advanced before the emperor. A series of spells shot in the direction of the Templars as they had no choice but to raise their shields in order to protect themselves. Bang! The palace trembled as a wave of pressurized wind swept through the hall, forcing a few people back. As the residual mana from the series of attacks faded, the entire scene shifted as the Templars were surrounded from all sides, their expression filled with shock and confusion as they turned to look in the direction of Jackal, who looked equally stunned. Everything had happened so quickly that hardly anyone was able to react in time. But soon, as if understanding what had happened, Jackal's face twisted. However, he was quick to recover as he shouted, "What is the meaning of this?" His voice boomed loudly, his attention directed towards the Templars. It was his loud voice that cut through the chaos that was within the hall, and brought a moment of silence. "How dare you try to act against the Emperor?" There was something about his voice that felt domineering and powerful. It was enough to attract the attention of several as they turned to look in his direction. Who is he? What is he doing? As if realizing the plan had failed, the Templars' eyes suddenly grew hazy. Before any of the guards or bystanders could approach, their faces turned purple, veins bulging from their heads, and soon, thump, they all fell to the floor. Dead. What? No. Several screams echoed throughout, but there weren't many. It was mainly the reporters or the weak-minded people who had been invited as extras. A lot of the individuals present were used to such situations, and as such, weren't surprised by what had happened. What was most alarming was the fact that they killed themselves so decisively. Especially in front of so many powerful figures. Nonetheless, all attention soon fell on those from the Church of Oricleus. In particular, the Cardinal. With him being the highest one in position, it was only natural that he would get all of the attention. However, it was an unexpected figure who spoke up. Of all the delegates he appeared to be the calmest one. With a sigh, he was the first to approach the Emperor. "I apologize, Your Majesty. I don't understand how something like this could have happened. Although the Templars aren't directly under my jurisdiction, it is also true that they were with me. Considering how they did something like this, I'll take full responsibility for the events. If you wish to detain someone, please take me in." Following the death of the Templars, a little bit of order had been re-established in the hall. As everyone processed Jackal's words, a wave of murmurs and whispers echoed. Why is it him again? Shouldn't the responsibility fall on the Cardinal? Why is he speaking on behalf of the Church? Is the Church of Oricleus going to use him as a sacrificial lamb for this failure? The hall fell silent the moment the Emperor raised his hand. In spite of what had happened, he looked fully composed as he walked up towards Jackal, his gaze scanning the young boy. Eventually, his lips parted, and he asked, "I respect your willingness to put yourself forth and take responsibility, but that responsibility shouldn't fall on you." The Emperor's gaze eventually fell on the Cardinal. It should fall on him. As the Emperor fixed his gaze on the Cardinal stepped forward, only to be halted by Jackal, who remained calm and composed. That would certainly be the case under normal circumstances, but with a clear conscience, I cannot let the Cardinal bear the blame for this. As the next saint of the Church of Oricleus, I believe the responsibility should fall on me instead. The next saint. Immediately, the hall erupted once again in a series of whispers. Even Leon was surprised. How could he not be? The Church had several important positions, with the Pope holding the highest rank. Below the Pope, the Cardinal position was considered the second most prestigious. At least, on the surface. However, there was in fact one position higher than the Cardinal's. The saint position was granted to those chosen to inherit the Church's legacy, as well as to serve as the next Pope. In the absence of the Pope, the highest-ranking delegate was not a cardinal, but rather the saint. As a result, Jackal's words did hold weight. "You're the saint." Even the Emperor looked surprised by the sudden piece of news. Clearly, this wasn't something that anyone knew. "Indeed, I am the current saint." Jackal lowered his head in respect. "It is unfortunate that I introduce myself like this, but given my current position and status, I have no choice but to step up and take responsibility for this mess." A strange silence filled the surroundings following his words as the Emperor eyed the saint. Nobody could tell what the Emperor's thoughts were as his eyes remained empty, but soon enough, his lips parted. "I understood." With a gentle nod, he directed his attention towards the nearby guards. Detain him. The guards swiftly moved toward the saint as he raised both hands in surrender. The entire time, the saint remained calm as he followed every little instruction from the guards and accepted the results without any complaints. His quick and decisive actions earned the admiration of those in attendance as he was soon brought away. Following his departure, the emperor turned his attention back towards the audience. Well, that was unexpected. He smiled. I would normally continue with the Q&A, but considering what has just happened, it would be best if we stop here for now. I do apologize for what has happened, and wish all of you the best. The emperor retreated shortly after that as noise returned to the hall. As Leon sat in his seat, he slowly turned his head to look at Julian. At least, tried to. When he turned his head, he realized something. Julian. He was missing. Ah, shit. Leon leaned his back against the chair and cursed. Not again. 585. He's more eloquent than I expected. He's somehow turning the situation around, and improving his own image. Not that it matters. I knew from the very start that my actions would at best cause a little bit of inconvenience to Jackal. At the end of the day, my goal was something else. I could deal with Jackal later. Staring at the scene at the front, I brought my attention away from Jackal and redirected it towards Delilah, who appeared focused on the scene up front. Good thing she saw my message. I put my communication device away. A few minutes ago, I had sent her a message, instructing her to block all sound from reaching the ears of the 7 targets precisely when the clock hit 9:11 p.m. I was worried she might not see the message or ignore it, but the moment I raised my head, I saw her staring at the message. She didn't even look at me while staring at the message, only frowning a little before putting it away. That made me worry as well, but it all turned out well. Although the 7 people involved did notice something amiss, that was as far as they noticed. Given Delilah's strength and skill, there was no way they'd be able to notice anything. Furthermore, with me suddenly standing up and shifting the attention elsewhere, they quickly dropped the matter and focused their attention on the emperor. That was all it took for them to forget about the minor discomfort. That made things easier for me, as things were still far from over. Got you. My attention shifted towards the reporter who had been talking to the emperor a few minutes prior. His expression was a mix of confusion and anger. Not wanting to take any more risks, I quietly navigated through the chaos and moved in his direction. As things stood, I wasn't worried he'd try something again. With how things currently were, it was impossible to kill the emperor. Not only that, but with everyone so alert, trying to repeat the scenario would just give away their intention. And as expected, shortly after everything fell apart, the reporter took his chance to quietly move back in an attempt to leave the surroundings. I followed them with my gaze until, they suddenly faded from my sight. What in the unexpected turn of events caught me off guard as I scanned the area for any sign of their presence. Yet, no matter how desperately I searched, they were nowhere to be found. It was as if they had disappeared from the face of the venue. But I knew that wasn't possible. With so many people present, there was no way they could just disappear like that. If it's like that, then there's no doubt they've disguised themselves or hid their presence. I felt the former was more likely. Some sort of hide and seek. It was very unfortunate for him that I was quite good at playing hide and seek. Especially after my most recent skill acquisition. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes for a brief moment before opening them up again. Right then, a change occurred in my vision. Everyone's appearance had shifted, now entirely bathed in blue. The outlines of their faces became more distinct, though that was the only real change. But that wasn't the most important part. What truly was important was that it granted me the ability to see the true outline of all those present. In essence, illusions or masks didn't work before my very eyes. Ah, found you. And soon, I found my target. He hadn't actually gone too far from where he previously was. In fact, he was still quite close to me and I took that chance to head his way. Unlike before, his hair was now black, and no longer in a bowl cut. His eyes were green, and he appeared to have taken on a few pounds. He looked like a completely different person than before, and soon. Ook, hey, I bumped into them. Ah, sorry. The moment I did, he gave me a glare, but I quickly apologized and patted his body on a couple of occasions. Are you okay? I really didn't mean to. I was just trying to get a better view of the situation. No, I'm fine. Stop touching me. Ah, sorry. Throwing me another glare, he distanced himself from me. I stopped in my tracks then and stared at his departing back. Or more importantly, the multiple tags that I had placed on his body. Given the current situation, there's not much I can do right now. But if he plans on making a move in the next few days, I'll be ready to neutralize him swiftly. The tags were extremely hard to find, and unless there was another emotive mage present, with the same level of skill as me, then I doubted anyone could find the tags. The only unfortunate thing was that the tags didn't last for a very long time. I probably had at best a day or two before I'd need to place new ones in his body again. But a day or two was enough for now. Given how badly his plan had turned out, I doubted he'd have the patience to wait for another opportunity to arise. He'd probably force something, and in case he did plan on forcing the situation, I was prepared to act at any given second. Things would be easier if I could get Delilah to do something again, but I doubt she would be able to do a thing considering how closely monitored her every movement is. It might even give away the fact that we know who the culprit is. By now, it was clear that the reporter had been the one to initiate the situation instead of the Emperor. It still didn't take away from what I had previously theorized, but it at least made things easier for me. I took a deep breath and looked around. There were still a couple of days left until the end of the Congress. Who knew what was going to Ding. Filled Diamond, you were able to stop the Emperor from getting assassinated. As a result, peace between the four empires can continue. What? Seeing the notification flash before me, I fell into a daze. This made no sense. Completed. How? This fast? No, how does this make sense? Is it some sort of glitch? Filled Diamond main quest activated, Royal Dilemma. Character progression plus 317%. Game progression plus 14%. Failure. Aoife K. Megrail 38%. Kira Milna 4%. Evelyn J. Verlice 15%. The quest window appeared shortly after, and I could only blankly stare at it. Filled Diamond game progression express plus 14%. Game progression. 0%, 87%, 100%. The progression also increased, further adding to the proof that I had somehow managed to complete the quest. In spite of how shocked I was, there was no denying it. I had really managed to complete the quest. When the reality of the situation sank into my mind, rather than feeling satisfied, I felt weird. While the quest hadn't been an easy one, it had also been a lot easier than the ones I had encountered in the past. It's most likely due to the fact that I cheated and got Delilah involved, but still. It felt really weird for the quest to end like this. But I didn't dislike the feeling. More importantly, there's only 13% left before the game progression reaches the end. I wonder what will happen once it fully reaches 100%. It had been a mystery to me since the moment the weird system appeared. But still, I was curious. After everything that had happened, I knew that this was no game world and that this was some sort of future version of Earth. In that sense, what would reaching the end mean? What is happening? Everyone, be careful. Suddenly, a few startled screams pierced the air, and my head snapped toward the source of the noise as the hall erupted in chaos. Exclamation mark question mark quote. A bright white light engulfed my vision shortly after. It was so bright that it momentarily blinded me. By the time I recovered my vision, my gaze fell on the source of it all. There, standing between two guards, was none other than Jackal, wearing a simple smile on his face. He was different than before, his presence seeming more holy, as even his strength appeared to have increased a little. Wait, his strength increased. I suddenly had a bad feeling. As if sensing my gaze, his head slowly turned in my direction before nodding subtly. I apologize for that, everyone. With a certain grace that he seemed to lack before, he lowered his head. I had a sudden enlightenment, as seen by my sudden actions. It was completely out of my expectation, and I apologize for that. I mean no harm. He turned his attention towards the guards again. Please. Recovering from the shock, the guards quickly escorted him out of the building, leaving everyone in the hall in a state of shock before the place erupted with chatter. Did you see that light? It's true, his strength increased. Did you also not see how his strength increased? You can't fake something like that. I can't believe I saw an enlightenment in person. He really is the saint. Seeing the looks of admiration and fervor with which they were talking about the event, I had to take a moment to sit down. I thought back to the sudden event and covered my mouth. Something started to boil from deep within my chest. That was no enlightenment. Far from it. That thief My teeth gnashed harder than I had ever done before as notifications flashed before my vision, and my chest rose and fell repeatedly. There weren't many things that could piss me off. But if there was one thing that angered me more than anything, it was when someone took something that was rightfully mine. There was no denying my greed. I was greedy, I knew that, and when someone took what was mine. Ding! Slowly raising my head, and staring at the new notification that appeared before my very eyes, a laugh escaped my lips. Haha. Filled Diamond Main Quest activated. Collect what belongs to you. Character progression plus 332%. Game progression plus 13%. Failure. Aoife K. Megrail 15%. Kira Milna 15%. Evelyn J. Verlice 15%. Quote. Gladly. 586. What will happen once the experience bar reaches 100%? It was a thought that crossed my mind for a brief moment. In fact, it had been a thought that had been plaguing my mind for over a year now. This thought was now even more relevant than ever before. Just what was going to happen? If I completed these quests, would I reach the end? Then what about the other quests I hadn't completed? How come those were still there? In fact, if I completed those quests, wouldn't the bar reach above 100%? What then? But it all quickly faded to the back of my mind at this very moment. Right now, I couldn't care less about the experience bar. There was only one thing on my mind. And that was, he stole from me. He really took my rewards. I stared blankly at the quest window before me, my hands trembling. It was becoming increasingly difficult to hold back my anger. However, I had to hold back my anger. I couldn't let it out. Not yet, at least. Focus, maintain clarity. I knew I could erase my emotions at this very moment to calm myself down. However, if there was one thing that I had learned over the past 6 months while training my emotive magic, it was that one's control over emotive magic was reflected in how well they could control themselves from letting it spill out. I couldn't let my anger get control of me. I had to suppress it and then savor it. In a way, stopping myself from becoming angry and managing my emotions was a way to improve my control of them. Ding! A notification flashed before my vision, and I took a deep breath, the previous anger fading into nothingness. Alright, that's better. I raised my head and looked around me. So far, the first day of the Congress appeared to be over. Everyone looked startled, and the guards that were stationed were on full alert, checking everyone who was leaving the hall with sharp eyes and certain scanning devices. Considering what had happened, I had initially assumed they'd cancel the entire event, but that didn't seem to be the case. Were they so confident that they'd be able to stop whatever new situation occurred, or was the information that they were going to reveal that important? Whatever the case was, I would eventually find out tomorrow. For now, I planned on going back to the inn to rest. Or at least, that was the original plan. Julian. A certain warm, yet familiar voice reached my ears. I slowly turned my head, and a pair of bright yellow eyes met my gaze as Atlas approached from a distance. Seeing him arrive, I felt a lump form in my throat as I lowered my head to greet him. It's good to see. Let's save the greetings for later, Julian. I need you to follow me for a moment. I raised my head back up and looked at him. My body tensed slightly as I pursed my lips. You need me? Yes. Atlas smiled but didn't elaborate as he turned around and motioned with his finger. It's something rather important, so it would be best if you hurried. Ah, could it be? Did he find something out? My stomach flipped as I struggled to keep myself composed. Julian, but I had no choice. Straightening my back, I nodded once again and followed him from behind. In order for the investigation to proceed smoothly and fairly, we'll be carefully reviewing the situation before a trial takes place. Whether the involvement of the Templars had anything to do with the Church of Oricleus or not will be determined during the trials. After the events of the first day of the Congress, Jackal, along with several others from the Church of Oricleus who volunteered to accompany him, including the Cardinal, was led toward a particular building. The location was unfamiliar, but it seemed to have a hidden floor beneath it, and that was where they were all guided. Shortly after, they were all brought to several rooms where they were all informed about the situation before being split into different rooms. Of course, just because they were being suspected of trying to assassinate the Emperor, given their current positions and prestige, none of them were treated badly. At the very least, they were held to a certain regard. And that was why the Cardinal and Jackal were permitted to share the same room. However, aside from a large desk and several chairs, the room was otherwise empty. Jackal traced his finger over the table before looking at it. Quote dot 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 dot. It's quite clean. In spite of the situation he found himself in, he appeared extremely calm. Eerily so. This didn't go unnoticed by the cardinal, who looked around the room. There are runes engraved in every corner of this room. I'm afraid that unless a zenith comes, or the Chancellor of Haven is present, breaking out of this place is impossible. And why would we break out? Jackal raised his brow while looking at the cardinal's aged features. We're innocent, so why should we be worried about what is going to happen to us? Quote dot dot dot. That's not what I'm worried about. I was just making a simple observation of the room. I'm rather curious about the place where they've brought us. Well, it does seem interesting. Jackal pulled one of the chairs back and sat down. At the same time, his lips curled into a happy smile. He looked somewhat giddy. Why is he so happy? The cardinal had noticed this since they had left the venue, but Jackal, rather than looking distressed or even confused about the situation, he looked happy. Why? Was it because of his sudden enlightenment, or was there more to it? It would make sense if it were the enlightenment, but his expression was somewhat twisted. It felt almost scary. Jackal, I'm almost there. Jackal abruptly interrupted the cardinal, his leg tapping impatiently against the floor. Clutching his trembling chest, he finally lifted his head to meet the cardinal's gaze, his eyes now bloodshot with intensity. Cardinal, I can feel it. I'm almost there. Almost. At first, the cardinal was confused, but soon his eyes widened with realization as everything started to click in his mind. Yes, I'm almost there. I'm about to be whole. I can feel it. My body can take it now. There's just one thing that I'm missing. The cardinal moved towards Jackal, his expression extremely serious. Tell me, what do you need? Jackal licked his lips, his face trembling as he tried his best to keep his expression from twisting. The fake fragment, he mumbled. Quote dot dot dot. I need him. Once he's gone, I'll be able to fully inherit everything. For just a fleeting moment, Jackal managed to steal from the fake fragment, and in that brief instant, he saw something beyond comprehension. It was hard to put into words, but it felt as though he'd been yanked into the vastness of space itself. Stars, countless and brilliant, spiraled around him, distant yet tantalizingly close. At that moment, Jackal felt as though he had pierced the veil of existence, touching a plane of power he never dared to imagine. But like a dream slipping away at dawn, the sensation was gone almost as soon as it had come. Before he could fully grasp it, he was torn from that otherworldly realm and yanked back into the hall where the chaos had erupted. He wanted to go back there but knew it was impossible. At least, for the current him. With the taste of that power lingering on his mind, Jackal couldn't shake the hunger for it. He craved it, wanted to control it, to make it his. He wanted to get him. We need to get him. Reach that strange realm again. How long has it been since we've last seen each other? It feels like quite a long time. With the upcoming Congress, I've been quite busy, and so I haven't had the time to properly see you. Quote dot dot dot. That's all right. I've been holding up quite well. I can see that. Atlas appeared to be genuinely praising me. I could only take his compliments at face value. I couldn't really tell what was going on with his mind, so I had to be extremely careful. You've grown quite a bit since the last time that I saw you. This is gratifying to see. Thank you. We're here. Eventually, Atlas brought me to a certain door within the palace. It was a large wooden door, and staring at it, I felt my body shift. Just what sort of? Clank. The door swung open, revealing a vast room. A rich red carpet stretched across the white marble floor, its vibrant hue contrasting with the elegant surroundings. Paintings adorned the walls, and sofas were neatly arranged along the sides. A towering bookshelf stood beside a grand marble desk, behind which a figure, one I knew all too well, was seated. Ah, you've brought him. With sharp yellow eyes and graying features, it was none other than the Emperor. I quickly attempted to greet him, following the etiquette I had been taught, but before I could finish, Atlas intervened, halting me in my tracks. Quote dot dot dot. There's only two people you should ever bow to. I nervously swallowed while looking at him. He soon answered. Me and Cithras. There's nobody else that should ever make you bow. Oh, I looked in the direction of the Emperor, but seeing nothing strange with him, I could only nod my head. Good. Only then did Atlas look satisfied as his attention soon fixed on the Emperor once again. You asked me to bring him here. What is it that you wanted to talk to him about? Surely it isn't because you wanted to meet him, right? Quote dot dot dot. Of course not. The Emperor answered, his expression calm while he studied me with his piercing yellow eyes. I tried not to react under his gaze, but his eyes felt uncomfortable. Just as the discomfort reached its peak, he finally broke his gaze from me and pulled out a device. I'll make this quickly in consideration of Atlas. The Emperor tapped on the device, displaying an image. My heart almost leapt out of my chest at the sight of the image, as the image soon shifted into something else, and a video played. The Emperor is under attack. As my voice echoed from the speaker, the Emperor put the video on pause and looked at me. I commend you for defending me like that, but I've been wondering. His eyes narrowed all of a sudden as the video restarted, and he replayed the video again. The Emperor is under attack. Again. The Emperor is under attack. And then again. The Emperor is under attack. And then again, before eventually stopping. Quote. A heavy silence settled over the room as all eyes fixed on the video. The tension in the air felt suffocating, and just as I thought I could breathe, the Emperor's gaze shifted back to me, locking eyes with an intensity that made me instinctively tense up. I might be overthinking things, but why? Does it seem like you knew something was going to happen before it happened? His brow raised. Quote. Is it just because you're sharp, or is there more to it than you're letting out? 587. It wasn't like I didn't expect this to happen. In fact, from the moment that Atlas had called for me and brought me to this place, I more or less had guessed what was going to happen. That was why I already had an answer. Quote. Because I knew that something was going to happen in advance. Oh, the Emperor looked somewhat surprised while Atlas looked the same. I wasn't even sure if he was interested in this conversation or not. Nonetheless, I went on to explain the situation to them. At around 8:34 p.m., Leon warned me that something was about to happen. I stayed alert, watching closely. After all, I didn't know how accurate his feeling was, but thankfully, I trust him, and when I saw his expression start to falter, I acted. Leon. The Emperor turned to look at Atlas, who elaborated. He's Julian's knight, and one of the most promising cadets in Haven. No, I know who he is. The Emperor replied, his tone even. After all, he performed quite well at the summit. I was simply curious about how Leon might have known something was about to happen. It could be a result of some skill of his. That would make sense. The Emperor shifted his attention towards the recording device and moved the video back. At the same time, he eyed me. You said 8:34. Quote. Yes. Soon, he managed to fast forward the recording to the designated time, his brows furrowing as he focused intently on Leon, his gaze somewhat sharp. Eventually, however, his expression eased. He probably saw Leon react differently at that time. I see. As you say, Leon does indeed show some sort of weird reaction. Pausing, the Emperor continued to look through the footage. I just stood in silence, waiting for him to say something. Each second felt like an eternity as I stood before his presence. But eventually, he pulled his gaze away from the recording and nodded. It does seem like you're telling the truth. Of course, that still doesn't fully explain everything, but at the very least, it doesn't seem like you're involved in any of this. Quote. I try my best not to involve myself in troublesome situations. It was usually the troublesome situations that found their way to me. Not me to them. Well, this is indeed troublesome. The Emperor shifted his attention towards Atlas. He soon nodded. I'll continue to investigate this further, but for now, you're in the clear. I wish I could talk to you more, but unfortunately, my hands are currently tied. Actually, there is something. I cut the Emperor off before he could finish his sentence. Immediately, Atlas's and the Emperor's eyes set on me. I felt my entire chest cave in under the pressure of their gazes, but I remained cool-headed. I knew that the Emperor was merely saying those words out of formality, but since the opportunity presented itself, I was planning on taking it. Quote. There's something. I see. Feel free to tell me. If it's within my abilities, I'll try my best to help. The Emperor smiled, his eyes squinting. He didn't look at all pleased. Not that I cared. If Aoife took after you, then I'd like to meet with those from the Church of Oricleus. My words were met with an immediate, suffocating silence, as the Emperor's gaze bore down on me heavily. It was so intense that it felt as if a massive boulder had been placed on my chest, each breath growing more difficult as I struggled to bear the pressure of his stare. Just looking at his gaze, I understood something. You wish to meet with those who are suspected of plotting against me. One wrong word. Quote. The same people that you were alert about. And I was done for. Is there something that I'm unaware of? I could even feel Atlas's gaze from the side. He too looked curious. If at this very moment I didn't answer accordingly, I was afraid that almost a year ago, I was attacked in the academy. Regarding the perpetrator, I paused and shifted my attention towards Atlas, who seemed to have understood where I was going with my words. Are you trying to get back at them? Far from it, I didn't actually care about them. My goal was different, however, it wasn't like I could tell it to them directly. That was why I had to come up with this bullshit excuse. The meeting with the Pope was real. Before I was attacked, I managed to exchange a few words with him. He shared some important things that I need to pass on to those from the Church of Oricleus. Atlas's and the Emperor's gazes felt prickling. Nevertheless, they didn't bother me that much. All of this information was something that Atlas was aware of, and most likely, to some extent, the Emperor. This information, could you not have shared it with them earlier? And why would I do that? I looked at the Emperor strangely. We're talking about the same people who almost had me killed. I didn't want anything to do with them. Oh, yes. The Emperor looked a little taken aback, but recovered rather quickly. It makes sense if you put it that way, but why the sudden change of heart? If you didn't want to tell them before, why do you wish to do it now? Because the opportunity presented itself, and I am not worried about my safety. You're not worried about your safety? I smiled then, turning my head to look at the two of them. Should I be? The room fell into a strange silence for what felt like an hour, but the silence didn't last long as the Emperor soon burst out laughing. Ha ha ha. His laugh bellowed throughout the room, causing some of the paintings to tremble. He sat there laughing for the next minute before he stopped and looked at me. Indeed, why worry about your safety when we're here? He placed his hand down and looked at Atlas. Very well, then, it shouldn't be difficult. I'll set up a meeting between you and them. Thank you very much. I lowered my head and expressed my gratitude. Shortly after that, a new individual entered the room, and I was escorted out of the office space. A moment after Julian left. After calming down, the Emperor directly addressed Atlas from his seat. What do you think? Are you buying his story? He doesn't seem to be lying. Atlas answered, his tone flat as he walked towards the nearest seat and sat down. There is a lot to think about regarding his story. If we press him for more answers, I'm sure we'll be able to determine if he's truly speaking the truth or not. That is irrelevant, Atlas answered, his eyes narrowing. What concerns me more is the Church of Oricleus. Setting Julian's actions aside, their response was too swift. It's as if they were expecting something to happen. Expected. The Emperor suddenly frowned, falling into thought. Considering the nature of the church they follow, it wouldn't be far-fetched to think they might have foreseen something beforehand. Atlas didn't speak immediately, and drummed his fingers over the armrest of the chair. With his brows knitting together, he sat there in silence while crossing his arms. He sat there for several minutes, chewing on the Emperor's words before standing up. That could very well be the case. And if it is, then it seems someone is targeting your life. Not my life, but something else. Atlas's hand stopped, and his expression frosted over. The Emperor continued, they're aiming to sow chaos within our empire. I have a few potential groups in mind that could be behind this. It could be someone within our empire, trying to destabilize things and overthrow the royal family. Or, someone from the other empires. Atlas stood up from his seat, his expression calm and collected. However, to those who knew him, the calmer Atlas was, the more terrifying he was. At this very moment, Atlas's calmness felt unsettling. Heading towards the door, Atlas stopped right before the door. You're forgetting the most important and most likely situation. I have. The Emperor paused and tilted his head in confusion. That was when Atlas grasped the knob of the door. That the one responsible might not be targeting our empire directly, but us. Crack. The doorknob shattered as Atlas placed too much force on it. And who knows us the best? Whatever was left of the doorknob disintegrated into fine dust as Atlas's eyes began to glow with a fierce, bright yellow hue. Massaging his neck, his body faded from the spot. Silence returned shortly after as the Emperor stared in the direction of where Atlas used to be. Covering his mouth with his hand, the Emperor's expression turned grave. War might soon be upon us. Before I knew it, I found myself being brought into a completely different place. Looking around, it looked to be some sort of secret facility that was underground. The lights were dim, and each step echoed loudly in my ear. There were several rooms placed on each side of the walls, with a long corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly. The place looked eerie, enough to make me feel unsettled, but if there was one thing that truly made me unsettled, it was, where exactly is this place? And how did I get here? My inability to recall how I had managed to get to this place. No matter how hard I tried recalling the road and direction I took in order to get to this place, strangely enough, I couldn't recall anything at all. It felt utterly unsettling, and no matter how hard I tried to recall how I had ended up here, my mind would slip into an empty haze. What sort of, we're here? Eventually, the man escorting me led me to a certain door. As I turned my head, I watched him place his hand against the wall. A faint glow began to radiate from his touch, and with it, several runes materialized on the surface, glowing softly in the dim light. Click! The door swung open with a faint clicking sound, revealing a small room. My gaze immediately landed on the figure at the far end of a metallic table, his green eyes locking onto mine. He sat with his elbows propped up on the table, fingers interlaced as his lips curled into a devious smile. It looks like you couldn't wait to see me, fake fragment. 588. There were two people in the room. I was already somewhat familiar with the cardinal from the Church of Oricleus as he sat on one of the seats, his expression hazy as he looked at me. I paid him no mind and looked towards the young man who sat at the end of the table, his expression at ease. Quote. My steps paused as I looked at him. Something about that smile of his. It just felt so irritating to stare at. The emotions I had barely managed to keep under control nearly exploded all at once in that moment. Just barely, I managed to maintain my composure as I sat down on the opposite end. At the same time, I turned my attention towards the cardinal, who merely smiled and stood up before walking up towards the guard who had escorted me all the way here. Please lead me to another room. I'll let these two talk. Quote. Understood. Given his position, the guard had no choice but to obey, leaving with the cardinal and closing the door behind him. Clank. The silence returned, more stifling than ever as I sat down and stared at the man on the opposite end of the table. The entire time, his lips were pulled into a smile. But eventually, the silence was broken. I know what you're worried about, and you don't have to be too worried. My brow raised then. What was he talking about? I opened my mouth to speak, but just as I did so, I saw his eyes start to change. They suddenly turned hollow, almost empty, as they started to spin. What sort of situation is this? Before I could make sense of what he was trying to say, the world around me began to spin. Stunned, I fought against whatever was happening to me, but the force pulling me away was overwhelming. Quote. Exclamation mark question mark quote. Eventually, I lost sight of everything, the colors faded, and my world plunged into darkness. Wah! By the time I recovered my sight, I found myself standing in a white world. I hastily looked around me to see the place devoid of anything, and when my eyes eventually fell on the familiar figure, it all clicked. Mind space. This wasn't a place I hadn't been to before. In fact, I had been here before, during my fight against Keys at the summit. This place was familiar, but for someone to enter such a space. Don't tell me he's also an emotive mage. I'm not an emotive mage, and within this place, you don't have to worry about anyone eavesdropping on our conversation. Jackal's voice echoed throughout the empty space, his expression seemingly always at ease. I held my breath while staring in his general direction. With both hands behind his back, Jackal calmly walked around the space. To enter the mind space, you don't necessarily need to be an emotive magic. What you need to be is an exceptional individual within the mind category. Moving one hand next to his temple and tapping on it, he looked at me. Quote. And that should be a given to those that inherited his legacies. His legacies. I understood immediately who he was talking about. Oricleus. To wield his power, you need an exceptional mind. If your mind is too weak, you're likely to crumble under the weight of the visions and abilities. That's why only those with a certain level of mental strength can handle them. Coming to a pause, Jackal's eyes narrowed as he looked at me. Why do you think I've waited for so long to meet you? Did you think it was because I was too lazy to deal with you? He shook his head with a smile. Quote. Of course not. He pressed his fingers against his temple again. It simply came down to the fact that my mind couldn't handle inheriting his powers. I needed to adjust my mind to inherit his powers, and the time has finally come. Extending both of his hands in my direction, his smile turned a little more gentle. The time has finally come for me to inherit his legacy and fully become whole. So I hope that you don't resist and let me inherit what rightfully belongs to me. I stood in silence, staring at Jackal with my jaw slackened. This guy, he's totally lost it, hasn't he? Seeing his expression and seeing just how self-assured he was about his delusion gave me secondhand embarrassment. But more importantly, I found myself musing over his words. To be able to fully inherit Oricleus's powers, I need a mind strong enough to do it. A thought suddenly struck my mind as I unconsciously found myself looking at the 4-leaf clover on my right arm. Could it be that the first leaf was granted to strengthen my mind and emotive abilities to prepare me for the moment I fully inherit Oricleus's powers? The more I thought along those lines, the more I felt I was onto something. But still, there were a few things that didn't make sense. Raising my head, I stared in Jackal's direction. How do you know all of this? Ha, Jackal chuckled then, lowering his hands. Of course you wouldn't know. I expected nothing less from a fake like you. I frowned then. Just as I was about to open my mouth to speak, he cut me off. What do you think about the 7 gods? What, do you think we worship the gods because of their strength? Is that not the case? As far as I understood, the gods weren't really gods. They were merely 7 strong individuals who came from the old earth and were trapped in the mirror dimension. For them to be gods, they're anything but gods. It looks like you don't see them as gods. Jackal laughed, his head shaking in what looked to be disappointment. The reason why we worship the gods isn't because of their strength. Sure, they were indeed some of the most powerful people of their time, but would that mean we'd have to worship every strong individual into a god? I had nothing to refute him with. Then, the reason why we worship them as gods is because they were the 7 who managed to gain access to the source. Source? What? Jackal suddenly covered half of his face, his hand pinching his face as he almost seemed to be depressing himself. As a fake, you wouldn't understand, but I've seen the source. I've managed to tap into it once, and in that moment, I almost felt like I was starting to lose sight of myself. If not for the fact that my mental strength was just barely strong enough to keep me from losing myself, I probably wouldn't be here any longer. Jackal stopped then, his expression turning a little pale. His chest rose and fell a couple of times before he shifted his attention back to me. Never mind all of that. Seeing how you've never caught a glimpse of the source, I can say that I'm not surprised. In that case, I'd like to make things easier for the 2 of us. Give me my blood back and I won't bother you any longer. That sounds tempting. I licked my lips. Of course, the tempting part was merely him not bothering me any longer. Regarding the blood, I couldn't give it to him. It was far too important for me. It was the only way for me to see Noelle and everything. Whatever this thing called source was, I knew I'd eventually get in touch with it. I was curious, but not desperate. But at the same time, it made me curious. This was a new piece of information. If the reason they're called gods is because they managed to get in touch with this strange source, then does that mean there's a higher realm compared to the zenith? I thought about it, but soon shook my head. If there were, Cithras would most likely be in that realm. I didn't think that was the case. Whatever this source was, it most likely was something else. Whatever it was, I'd be able to figure more of it out when the time came. For now, there were more pressing matters at hand. Are you tempted? In that case, why don't you just allow me to absorb everything? Either way, this is better than having the entire force of the church attack you, right? Regardless of how powerful you are, there's no way you can fight against the churches. Is that a threat? Yes, it is. Jackal smiled and didn't deny it. Staring at his eyes, I could see they were serious. Indeed, if by the end of this little conversation of ours, I didn't agree to hand over the blood, I was sure he'd get the churches to do something against me. All right. You? No. I shook my head and snapped my fingers. Crash. The white space shattered apart, under Jackal's stunned expression, as the white world faded, and we found ourselves back in the same room as before. Adjusting my clothes, I stood up while pressing my hand against the cold metal table. I had gotten all I needed from this conversation. Now, it was time for me to leave. Let the churches come for me. I didn't turn back while saying this, heading directly for the door and opening it. Just as I was about to stop, I paused. You've called me fake more times than I care to count. I never bothered to respond because it was irrelevant. Fake, real, it's meaningless. A man obsessed with such distinctions is someone trapped within their own sight. I care nothing for those who can't see beyond the limit of their own mind. And right now, I see a lot of things. Most of all, I see that you're going to have a hard time getting out of this one. After all, you may have the church backing you, but it's not like I'm without backers. Jackal's face changed then, but it was already too late. What does that? Clank. I closed the door before he could get his words out. That was when it started. Bang, bang, bang. The muffled thud of chairs crashing, punctuated by screams echoing from the depths of the room. I laughed then. 589. Source. As I stepped out of the room, my mind lingered on the conversation I had just had. Above all, my thoughts kept returning to this so-called source. What in the world was it? Based on the way he spoke about it, whatever this source is, it has to be something incredibly important. The difference between a god and a regular human. I pressed my lips tightly. This entire concept was new to me, and while I wanted to spend more time musing over the concept, I understood that it would just be a waste of time. I was also sure that hardly anyone knew about this concept, and that asking would only lead to more trouble. If things eventually progress as they should, I should be able to learn more about that power. For now, I should focus on something more important. Like, finding a way to merge my two domains. Even after reaching the 6th tier and spending half a year refining my domains, I still struggled to merge the two. In fact, it almost became clear to me that it was impossible for me to merge them. Transitioning between them, and even mixing them, was possible, but merging. It almost felt impossible. No matter how hard I tried, my attempts to merge them always ended in failure. This seemingly simple task felt like something that the world rejected. And yet, even though I knew this and understood it, I continued to try. I just needed to find the right opportunity. That was really all there was to it. Are you done? Not far from the room, the guard who had escorted me here stood waiting. I looked past him to see the cardinal standing in silence and gave a slight nod. Yes, I'm done. Something about the way the cardinal looked at me felt unsettling, but I chose to ignore it. I simply walked past him, waiting for the cardinal to be escorted back into the room before making my way out of the strange place. I didn't want to stay here for a second longer. This place. It felt extremely eerie. So, when I finally stepped outside and breathed in the fresh air once more, I felt a sense of liberation. Things were far from over. But, for now, I at least didn't have to worry too much. Clank. Quote. The cardinal entered the room, his gaze immediately locking onto the figure seated at the far end of the table. Jackal's expression was completely blank, cold, detached, almost unreadable, as his fingers interlaced in front of him. The cardinal's footsteps came to a halt. The silence between them stretched like a tight wire. He stood still, waiting for Jackal to speak, to acknowledge his presence. How long had he stood there? A minute, an eternity. Finally, Jackal slowly raised his head, his eyes meeting the cardinal's with unnerving calm. And then, without warning, the world turned white. Quote. Exclamation mark question mark quote. The cardinal's expression shifted, his face unable to hide his shock. His heart thumped as realization quickly dawned on him. This white world, it was no regular white world. No, this was Jackal's mind space, a place he controlled completely. For Jackal to be able to bring him here. The cardinal's breath caught. He's ready. He's more than ready to absorb the remaining blood. Before he could gather his thoughts, Jackal's voice cut through the blinding white. He's arrogant. The cardinal raised his head, confused. For a mere fake, he's quite arrogant. A thin line of irritation appeared at the corner of Jackal's mouth, but he quickly hid it away. This didn't go unnoticed by the cardinal, who looked surprised. It seems like something went down during the meeting between the two. For the usually calm Jackal to show signs of irritation. Just as the cardinal's lips parted open to respond, Jackal's voice came again, sharper this time. There's a lot more I want to say, but I'll keep it to myself for now. Let's not drag this out. My body's ready to take in the missing blood. Make sure everything's in place when the Congress ends. What? But, there's no need to worry about how the empires or Haven will react, Jackal interrupted, his tone turning colder, more annoyed. By the time I've fully absorbed the blood, their stance will be irrelevant. Jackal clenched his fist, his knuckles slowly turning white as he locked eyes with the cardinal. So get everything ready. His voice grew hoarse with each subsequent word that came out of his mouth. Quote. I'll be the one to deal with the aftermath. Congress, Day 2. Given the events that unfolded on the first day of the Congress, security had naturally been tightened even further. Today was the day of the Etheria Empire to express their viewpoints on the mirror dimension and how to tackle the current situation. In general, nothing eventful occurred during this day. Even the reporter, who had previously been present, was missing. And with the tighter security, everything flowed smoothly. That went a lot better than expected. Quote. We still have 3 days left, and knowing that you're here, something will happen one of these days. I put all my money on the last day. Hey, Leon quickly poured cold water over me. Leon's comment hit a little too close to home. The worst part, I couldn't find anything to argue with. In fact, I knew he was right. It's probably going to be those fanatics from the Church of Oricleus, or the ones behind the plot to assassinate the Emperor. Just the thought made me depressed. Don't worry too much. As if understanding my worries, Leon pressed his hand over my shoulder. I'm here, as your KNI. Oh, fuck, I'm fucked, aren't I? No, I said, when have you ever been useful? You're just a salary thief at this point. That's not my fault, that you're a salary thief. Then give me the money that you make for me. I'll take it. Quote. See, thief. Leon reached out for his sword and gripped it. Leon reached for his sword, gripping it as if contemplating how best to strike me down. His face said it all. I clicked my tongue then. What, you're trying to kill your boss because they called you out for stealing money? I am. Leon's face twisted in discomfort. He clearly struggled to find the right words to argue against me, but the more he tried to think of something, the more his expression seemed to break down. See, fine. Leon eventually let go of his sword and sighed. I was just about to throw a few more shots in, but Leon raised his hand to stop me while beckoning me with his finger. Follow me. I looked around me. Don't tell me that you're trying to silence me in priv. No, I'm not. Leon cut me off before I could finish my words. I watched, half exasperated, as he walked away, heading in a different direction. His serious demeanor left me no choice but to follow. Where is he bringing me? I looked around me. We had been walking for the past 10 minutes around the city, and as I questioned him about where we were going, he'd only reply to me with, just wait. We're almost there. You'll see soon. Never once did he give me a proper answer, and just as I was about to get fed up, his steps finally came to a pause. Similarly, I stopped and raised my head to examine the square-shaped building ahead. It had a modern feel, its exterior made of sleek metal, with several large windows that offered a clear view inside. And it was through such windows that I understood where Leon had brought me. A gym. Quote. Yes. Leon answered with a nod, casually walking into the building and heading towards the reception desk. Wait, why are we in a gym? Like I said, I'll show you. What? I stopped and looked at him. I was actually joking about that before, but seeing how serious he looked, I could tell that he was serious about whatever he was trying to pull. And it was for that reason that I stopped questioning him. After waiting for him to pay for the room, we were eventually led to a large empty space reserved just for the two of us. Considering the strength of both of you, this room should be able to withstand most of the power from your attacks and spells. That said, please try not to go overboard. We can't guarantee that the walls will fully hold up against the full force of your strikes. After a brief warning from the staff in charge, we were left to our own devices. Leon casually walked to the other end of the room, tossing his blazer aside as he did. Thump. He then jumped a couple of times and did some stretches. I just stood in silence, watching him. I was still not fully sure of what he was trying to show me. There are 2 things that I want to show you. Finally finished with his stretches, Leon rolled up the sleeves of his shirt. Clenching and unclenching his fists, he turned to me, his expression extremely serious. I want you to attack me with everything you have. What? You want? Just attack me. He cut me off. Don't use your emotive magic. That would defeat the purpose of what I'm trying to show you. But what are you trying to show me? Stop talking and just attack me. He beckoned me forward. I opened my mouth, but something in his gaze stopped me. Sighing, I relented. Alright, fine, I'll entertain you for now. Without hesitation, I flicked my finger, and dozens of threads shot toward Leon. Shoo! The threads moved with incredible speed, faster than the eye could follow. Just as they reached him, I flicked my wrist again, sending the threads shooting upward. Nothing. Leon remained completely still, not even flinching. This was surprising since I half expected him to react by now. My brow furrowed as I clenched my fist. Are you trying to be dramatic? The threads split rapidly, interlocking with one another before branching out into sharp, needle-like strands. Get ready, I warned him, my voice coming out lower than I expected. In a blur, the needles rained down on Leon from all directions. Shoo, shoo, shoo. This should do it. I wasn't going all out, but this was still a powerful attack, one that even Keys had to take seriously. And yet, Leon didn't move. His expression was unreadable, his gaze locked on me, completely focused. My heart skipped a beat. This was weird, and my gut almost leapt out of me as I saw him remain still once again. Leon, I suddenly called out, feeling my lips grow dry. The needles were mere moments from hitting him, and still, he didn't react. What's going on? Why isn't he moving? Wait, shoo, shoo, shoo. The needles slammed into his body. Blood sprayed across the room, staining the floor. I froze. My mind blanked. No way. Is he? Leon stood motionless, his body pierced by countless needles. The ground beneath him was soaked in red. I couldn't move. I could only stare in a daze. What just happened? I whispered, staring in disbelief. But just as I started to rush to him, Leon raised his hand, stopping me in my tracks. He didn't speak. His eyes locked onto mine, cold and focused. That's when I saw it. The wounds on his body, they were healing. Rapidly. What in the world? 590. Drip, drip. The sound of blood dripping echoed through the training space as I stared blankly at Leon. I recalled what had happened just a few moments prior and found myself slowly opening my mouth. Did you just? Yes, it's a new skill that I learned. Leon's calm voice echoed as he looked at his torn-up clothes. Massaging the back of his neck, I heard him mumble, I just bought this yesterday. Do I have to buy a new one? He then looked at me, and I looked away. Was he trying to get me to pay for that? Hell no. I quickly shifted the topic of conversation elsewhere. Did you acquire a new bone? Quote. You can say so, Leon answered while pulling his hand back down and staring at the blazer in the distance. He sighed in relief, at least that one is okay. Wait, what do you mean you can say so? It's a little complicated, but just take it as is. But, it's not like I ask about what happened yesterday, right? Saying those words, Leon looked at me meaningfully. His gaze said, you always keep secret and I never pry, so you won't mind if I do the same, right? Quote. Quote. I hated how I couldn't argue back. Fine, whatever the case was, this new skill looked incredibly impressive. It almost felt like Kalion's domain. Well, at least that was how it looked at first glance. Sitting down on the floor, I similarly took my blazer off. Is there some sort of limit to your ability? Is it like Kalion's skill? Or is there more to it? There's more to it. Oh, quote. As far as I know, Kalion's skill heals most of his injuries, but I don't think it can mend broken bones or severed limbs. I can. What? I looked at Leon, baffled. That overpowered? Yes. Seriously, I wanted to ask more about it, but seeing the sort of expression that Leon was making, I knew he wouldn't tell me even if I had asked. A bit of a pity, but considering how I was the same to him, I decided to stay quiet. Ah, right, it was also then that I recalled something. Didn't you say something about showing me two things? If this is the first one, what about the second thing? Ah, right, as if expecting me to ask this, Leon casually walked out of the room, much to my confusion. He came back a minute after, a sword in hand. Quote. I had to get this. I can see. Kicking the blazer aside, Leon stood in the middle of the training ground while I continued to remain seated where I was. A thought occurred to me. Did you finally manage to master the sword style that you were previously talking about? No, then, but I've managed to improve it thanks to what you showed me. I don't think I've ever shown you it fully completed. Now that I think about it, you haven't. In fact, I had hardly ever seen him use this move. It was mainly because it was incomplete, but recalling how the steps worked, I understood just what sort of potential it had. Okay then, I beckoned him with my hand. Show me whatever you're trying to show me. I was a little curious. To see how much he wanted to show me this strange sword technique, he must have developed it quite a bit. I wonder just how strong it is. My finger twitched. For a moment, I almost wanted to have him attack me, but considering how I was also wearing my suit, I decided against it. That would be quite a waste. I'm ready. And so, hearing Leon's words, I straightened my back and prepared to see the power of Leon's developed attack. Just how much stronger was his new sword movement? Leon took a deep breath, his mind clearing of all thoughts. This was the very first time he was going to display this full move to someone, and he felt a little nervous. Not because he was afraid of messing up. No, it was more because he was afraid he'd go too hard. The last time he performed this move in training, his sword shattered into pieces, leaving a massive scar across the training floor. Quote. Closing his eyes, Leon felt the world around him. It was silent, with just the faint sound of Julian's breathing echoing before him. Leon drowned out the noise, letting silence settle within the space of his mind. The most crucial aspect of this move was the absolute calmness of the mind. He had to be in a state of utter calmness to perform the move. Drip. The gentle ripple of his sweat hitting the floor echoed through the space. Leon stepped forward, channeling mana into every inch of his body with fine precision. His back popped, and his muscles squeezed. He felt power slowly build up from deep within his body as he gripped the sword firmly. Make sure that your soldiers are in line with your legs. At the same time, he recalled a certain voice as it whispered in his mind. Let the mana roam freely within your body. Don't resist it. Accept it through every channel of your body. The same voice taught him how to fully use the move. It was as though he was extremely familiar with it. Not only that, but he was also the same one who had helped him learn how to heal. Leon had so many questions, but his questions were met with silence. He could only silently accept the teachings. Since this benefited him, he had no reason to refuse. But at the same time, he was wary. Why was he helping him? What did he benefit from helping him? Who? Leon took another deep breath, his chest relaxing. Finally, Leon opened his eyes. The world before him shifted, now etched with glowing yellow lines, each one tracing a path that unfolded before his very vision. In the silence that shrouded the space, Leon raised his sword, tracing one of the paths in front of him. Swoosh! It was just a single slash, and yet, the moment the sword cut through the air, it felt as if reality itself twisted, coiling tightly around the blade. As if in a trance, Leon took a step forward, following the golden footprint that appeared in his vision. Swoosh! He slashed his sword again, the air freezing with the second slash. And then came the third slash. The fourth slash. The fifth slash. Swoosh! Swoosh! With each slash, Leon's sword grew progressively faster, so fast that by the seventh strike, it almost felt as though he was stuck in the same spot, frozen in place. But he was moving, so fast that the naked eye could no longer keep up with his pace. Leon was absorbed in his own moves. In that very moment, he felt something with his mind crack, and his movements grew sharper, faster, and more liberated. His already improved movement was starting to become sharper, more precise. He was slowly reaching an even greater realm. Leon's entire body tensed as he followed the lines. In that moment, he understood. He was starting to grasp something. He stopped holding back. Crack. The very ground, resilient enough to endure high-tier spells, began to show signs of strain. Thin, jagged scars formed in a widening web around Leon, each new slash carving deeper into the ground. But by this point, Leon no longer cared. He was in a trance-like state, his eyes slowly turning black as stars started to emerge. Faster. He could go even faster. Faster. Slashing once again, Leon felt a sharp pain in his head as his expression twisted. He could feel that he was threading a dangerous territory. Something that could probably tear his entire body apart, but in that moment, he felt like he was reaching a certain something. Just a bit more. But what exactly was he reaching out for? Swoosh. Slashing again, Leon felt his sword touch something tangible. What the? Before he knew it, the air shattered, and the world around him changed as he was suddenly engulfed in darkness. White dots were scattered across the darkness, and as Leon looked up, he saw endlessness. He found there to be no end to the white dots and darkness. And yet, he was moving faster. Faster, and faster, so fast that Leon started to panic. In that moment, it almost felt like he was slowly being sucked by the endlessness in front of him. If he went even faster then, all disappear. Bang! As Leon slashed down for the nth time, a terrifying explosion erupted, its shockwave ripping through the training ground. The very air quivered, and the surroundings trembled violently under the force of his strike. Ha! When Leon snapped out of it, he found himself standing in the middle of the training ground again, the entire place littered by scars of all different sizes. The entire place, it was a complete mess. Drip. As sweat dripped down the side of Leon's face, he clutched his chest and dropped to one knee, supporting his body with the sword in his hand. Ha! Heavily gasping for air, Leon's lungs burned, struggling to take in as much as they could, while his muscles twisted and spasmed in agony. This wasn't the worst part of it all. My head. Clutching his head, Leon started to scream as he bent over, his forehead touching the ground, as his legs flailed as the pain started to consume him. Arg, this sort of pain. He had never experienced something like this before, and it was slowly consuming him. Ack! His scream pierced through the training hall again, and through his hazy vision, Leon looked up in the direction of Julian. Where was he? Why didn't he say anything yet? Did he get her? Leon's thoughts were abruptly cut by the figure sitting in the distance. He sat in silence, staring toward the spot where he had been moments ago, displaying his sword movement. At first glance, there seemed to be nothing wrong with Julian, but how is this possible? The area surrounding Julian was perfectly calm, untouched by anything. While the entire place was torn with scars and cuts, his area was perfectly clean, as though his sword had never come close to him. Most shocking was Julian's expression and eyes. They were blank, completely empty, and then, as if sensing Leon's gaze, Julian's eyes focused once again as he looked ahead. What happened here? He said, his expression confused and bewildered as he turned to look at Leon. Did you do this? When did you start performing? And why are you there?